15 years in law enforcement teaches you to read people. Body language, micro-expressions, the way someone's voice changes when they lie. It all becomes second nature, so when Zane started coming home late, showering before dinner, and checking his phone with the secretive intensity of a teenager, I knew exactly what was happening. I just didn't know how much worse it would get. Confession came on a Tuesday evening in March. Zane sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared coffee every morning for 8 years of marriage, and delivered his prepared speech with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. "Maria, I need to tell you something. I've been seeing someone else." He paused, waiting for tears or hysteria that didn't come. "Her name is Cassandra. She's pregnant with my child." I kept my expression neutral, a skill that had served me well during suspect interviews. "How long?" "6 months. He leaned forward, his voice taking on that earnest tone he used when trying to convince investors. "I didn't plan this, Maria. But now that there's a baby involved, I have to do the right thing. I'm filing for divorce." The right thing. As if abandoning his wife for a pregnant mistress was somehow noble. Zane had always been good at reframing his selfishness as virtue, but this was audacious even for him. "I see." I stood up, collecting my coffee cup. "I assume you'll want to move out soon." His face registered surprise, then relief. He'd expected a fight, tears, pleading. Instead, I was giving him exactly what he wanted, a clean, easy exit. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this," he said. "I know it's hard, but—" "Zane." I turned back to him. "You might want to pack a bag tonight. I imagine things are going to get complicated quickly." I saw confusion flicker across his features, but he was too eager to escape to question my words. Within an hour, he was gone, leaving behind only the keys to our shared life. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I got to work. Private investigation is about patience, methodology, and following the evidence wherever it leads. Personal feelings have no place in the process. I treated Zane's affair like any other case, starting with the basics: who, what, when, where, and why. Cassandra Walsh, 28, worked as a project coordinator at Meridian Construction. A quick search through Zane's business files revealed that Meridian was one of his newer subcontractors. They'd started working together around the same time his behavior changed. She was married per the records I'd found, but apparently separated with no children and rented a 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. Clean credit, no criminal record, active on social media with photos that painted her as an outdoorsy, wine-loving young professional seeking meaningful connections. The timeline was straightforward. Zane had started working with Meridian in September. His behavioral changes began in October. By November, he was fully invested in the affair, though he'd been careful to keep his phone locked and his schedule vague, but Zane had never been as clever as he thought. I'd been tracking his movements for weeks before his confession, partly out of professional curiosity and partly to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. GPS data from his car showed regular visits to Cassandra's apartment complex. Credit card statements revealed purchases at restaurants across town, expensive lingerie from boutiques I'd never heard of, and jewelry from stores that specialized in apology gifts. The pattern was textbook: guilty husband overcompensating with lavish spending while conducting an affair, but something about the timing bothered me. I spent 3 days conducting surveillance on Cassandra's apartment. She kept regular hours, leaving for work at 7:30 and returning by 5, except for Tuesdays and Thursdays when she left work a little early and visited a medical complex across town. Prenatal appointments, presumably. On Thursday, I followed her to the medical building and waited in the parking lot. When she emerged 2 hours later, she was carrying a small folder and talking animatedly on her phone. Even from a distance, I could see she was noticeably pregnant with the pronounced roundness that comes with a pregnancy into the 3rd trimester. If their relationship had started when Zane claimed, 6 months ago, she looked further along than that timeline would suggest. This looked more like 7 or 8 months. I spent the evening running calculations. If Cassandra was 7 months pregnant, conception would have occurred in August. Zane claimed their relationship started in October, but the pregnancy timing suggested she was already pregnant when she began targeting my husband. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Military records are surprisingly accessible when you know the right databases and have the proper credentials. Cassandra's previous address had been base housing at Fort Carson, Colorado. Her possibly estranged or even ex-husband Sergeant First Class Cade Walsh was currently deployed to Eastern Europe on a 9-month rotation that had begun in January of this year, after her affair with Zane started. The mathematics were elegant in their simplicity. Cade had been deployed for a couple months or so. Cassandra appeared to be 7 to 8 months pregnant. Zane had been involved with her for 6 months but believed he was the father of a child that had been conceived before their relationship even began. Either Cassandra had been unfaithful to both her husband and her boyfriend, or she was playing a much more sophisticated game than simple adultery. I spent the weekend researching Meridian Construction and their relationship with Zane's development company. What I found made my blood run cold. Meridian had been awarded 3 major subcontracts with Zane's firm over the past 6 months, all projects that Zane had personally approved, all significantly over budget, and all delayed by problems that required expensive modifications. The cost overruns had been substantial, but Zane had absorbed them without complaint, unusual for a man who normally scrutinized every expense. I pulled the financial records for both companies. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. Shell companies with ties to Meridian were billing Zane's projects for services that were either overpriced or completely fictional. Equipment rentals that exceeded market rates by 300%. Consulting fees for work that was never performed. Materials that were billed twice or never delivered. Zane was being systematically defrauded, and he was too infatuated with his mistress to notice. But the real revelation came when I cross-referenced Meridian's ownership structure with federal law enforcement databases. The company was connected to a network of construction firms that had been flagged for suspicious activity by the FBI's white-collar crime division. Bid rigging, money laundering, fraudulent billing. A comprehensive criminal enterprise that used legitimate construction projects to wash illegal money. And Zane, in his eagerness to please his pregnant mistress, had been making business decisions that facilitated their crimes. The confrontation came on a Friday evening. Zane arrived at the house to collect more of his belongings, whistling cheerfully as he sorted through his closet. He'd been staying with Cassandra for a week, and the arrangement was clearly agreeing with him. "How's domestic life treating you?" I asked from the doorway. He looked up, grinning. "Better than I expected. Cassandra's amazing, Maria. She's smart, funny, and she actually listens when I talk about work. She's given me some great advice about the Meridian projects." "I'm sure she has." Something in my tone made him pause. "What's that supposed to mean?" I handed him a manila folder. "It means your girlfriend is married to or estranged from a deployed soldier. She was pregnant before she met you, and she's been using your relationship to facilitate construction fraud that's going to land you in federal prison." He opened the folder and began reading. His face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally, fear. I watched as the color drained from his cheeks. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Cassandra wouldn't. She loves me. We're having a baby." "You're not having anything. She's having a baby with her husband, who's currently deployed overseas or with someone else. The timeline doesn't work, Zane. She was already pregnant when she started targeting you." He looked up at me with the expression of a man watching his world collapse. "Targeting me?" "Meridian Construction is part of a criminal network that's been using your projects to launder money. Every decision you've made about those contracts, every modification, every cost overrun, every change order has been designed to facilitate their crimes, and you've been signing off on all of it because your pregnant mistress told you it was good business." Zane sank into a chair, still clutching the folder. "But she's having my baby. She told me. She told you what you needed to hear to keep you compliant. You're not a boyfriend or a father figure. You're a mark. A target. A useful idiot who's been manipulated into committing federal crimes." The silence stretched between us. I could see him processing the information, trying to find a way to deny what was becoming undeniable. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. "I'm going to do what I should have done the moment I figured out what was happening. I'm calling the FBI." The federal investigation moved quickly once they had my evidence. Cassandra's network was more extensive than I'd initially realized, a sophisticated criminal organization that had been operating for years across multiple states. They used attractive women to target lonely or vulnerable men in positions of authority, manipulating them into making decisions that facilitated various white-collar crimes. Zane was arrested on a Tuesday morning at his office. The charges included conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. His bail was set at $2 million. Cassandra was arrested the same day at her apartment. The search warrant uncovered evidence of her involvement with at least 3 other men, all of whom had been manipulated into criminal activity. Her pregnancy was real, but DNA testing would eventually prove that her deployed husband was indeed the father. The media coverage was extensive. Local developer caught in construction fraud ring. Pregnant mistress leads to federal charges. Love triangle exposes $1 million crime scheme. Zane's reputation was destroyed. His business collapsed. His assets were frozen pending the outcome of his trial. The man who had walked away from our marriage believing he held all the cards now faced the possibility of 20 years in federal prison. As for me, I found myself in an unexpectedly advantageous position. The FBI needed a cooperating witness with intimate knowledge of Zane's business dealings and decision-making process. My law enforcement background and investigative skills made me invaluable to their case. I was granted immunity in exchange for my testimony. The divorce proceedings were expedited, with the court recognizing that Zane's criminal activity had compromised our marital assets. I was awarded the house, our legitimate investments, and protection from any financial liability related to his crimes. 6 months later, I watched from the gallery as Zane was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He'd aged decades in the months since his arrest, his confident swagger replaced by the hollow stare of a man who had lost everything. Cassandra received 12 years. Her baby was born in the county jail while she awaited trial since she never made bail. The baby boy was placed in the custody of her soon-to-be ex-husband's family. She never looked in my direction during the proceedings, but I could feel her hatred radiating across the courtroom. Zane's lawyer had tried to argue that his client was a victim of manipulation, that he'd been seduced and deceived by criminal masterminds. The prosecution countered that Zane's greed and willingness to ignore obvious red flags had made him a willing participant in the scheme. The truth, as usual, fell somewhere in between. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. A relief that it was over. Satisfaction that justice had been served. And something else, a cold, professional pride in a job well done. I'd spent 15 years in law enforcement learning to read people, to follow evidence, to uncover truth. I'd spent 5 years as a private investigator honing those skills in the private sector. But I'd never had a case as personal as this one. Zane had believed that confessing his affair and announcing his impending fatherhood would put him in a position of moral authority. He thought his pregnant mistress gave him justification for abandoning his marriage and claiming the high ground. I'd approached his betrayal like any other case, methodically, professionally, without letting personal feelings cloud my judgment. I'd followed the evidence wherever it led, no matter how devastating the implications. The irony wasn't lost on me. Zane had left me for a woman he believed was carrying his child, convinced that his new family gave him moral superiority. In reality, he'd been manipulated by a criminal who was pregnant with another man's baby, and his pursuit of this fantasy had cost him everything. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the conversation we'd had that Tuesday night in March. Zane had told me he was doing the right thing by leaving me for his pregnant mistress. He'd believed he held all the cards. He'd been wrong on both counts. Sometimes the right thing is letting justice run its course. Sometimes the person who really holds all the cards is the one who knows how to play them. Please like and subscribe for more great revenge story videos.